The Royal New Zealand Navy is the maritime arm of the New Zealand Defence Force. The fleet currently consists of 11 ships and 8 naval helicopters. History: pre-World War I, the first recorded maritime combat activity in New Zealand occurred when Dutch explorer Abel Tasman was attacked by Maori in war. Waka off the northern tip of the South Island in December 1642. The New Zealand Navy did not exist as a separate military force until 1941. The association of the Royal Navy with New Zealand began with the arrival of Lieutenant James Cook in 1769, who completed 2 subsequent journeys to New Zealand in 1773 and 1777. Occasional visits by Royal Navy ships were made from the late 18th century, until the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. William Hobson, a crucial player in the drafting of the treaty, was in New Zealand as a captain in the Royal Navy. The signing of the Treaty of Waitangi made New Zealand a colony in the British Empire, so the defence of the coastline became the responsibility of the Royal Navy. That role was fulfilled until World War I, and the Royal Navy also played a part in the New Zealand Wars. For example, a gunboat shelled fortified Maori Pa from the Waikato River in order to defeat the Maori King movement. World War I and the interwar period. In 1909, the New Zealand government decided to fund the purchase of the battle cruiser HMS New Zealand for the Royal Navy, which saw action throughout World War I in Europe. The passing of the Naval Defence Act 1913 created the New Zealand Naval Forces, still is a part of the Royal Navy. The first purchase by the New Zealand government for the New Zealand Naval Forces was the cruiser HMS Philomel, which escorted New Zealand land forces to occupy the German colony of Samoa in 1914. Philomel saw further action under the command of the Royal Navy in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. By 1917, she was worn out and dispatched back to New Zealand, where she served as a depot ship in Wellington Harbour for minesweepers. In 1921, she was transferred to Auckland for use as a training ship. From 1921 to 1941, the force was known as the New Zealand Division of the Royal Navy. The cruiser Chatham along with the sloop Veronica arrived in 1920. Philomel was transferred to the division in 1921, as was the sloop Torch. HMS Laburnum arrived in 1922 and then HMS Dunedin in 1924. HMS Diomede and the minesweeper HMS Wakakura arrived in 1926. Between World War I and World War II, the New Zealand Division operated a total of 14 ships, including the cruisers HMS Achilles and HMS Leander, which replaced Diomede and Dunedin. From 1919 to 21 to October 1940, the Royal Navy formation around New Zealand was the New Zealand Station, sometimes rendered New Zealand Squadron. World War II. When Britain went to war against Germany in 1939, New Zealand promptly declared war also. HMS Achilles participated in the first major naval battle of World War II, the Battle of the River Plate off the River Plate estuary between Argentina and Uruguay in December 1939. Achilles and 2 other cruisers, HMS Ajax and HMS Exeter, were in an operation that forced the crew of the German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Peter to scuttle her rather than face the loss of many more German seamen's lives. This decision apparently infuriated Hitler, Achilles moved to the Pacific and was working with the United States Navy when damaged by a Japanese bomb off New Georgia. Following repair, she served alongside the British Pacific Fleet until the war's end. The New Zealand Division of the Royal Navy became the Royal New Zealand Navy from the 1st of October 1941, in recognition of the fact that the naval force was now largely self-sufficient and independent of the Royal Navy. Ships thereafter were prefixed HMNZS. HMNZS Leander escorted the New Zealand Expeditionary Force to the Middle East in 1940, and was then deployed in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean. Leander was subjected to air and naval attack from Axis forces, conducted bombardments, and escorted convoys. In February 1941, Leander sank the Italian auxiliary cruiser Rambai in the Indian Ocean. In 1943, after serving further time in the Mediterranean, Leander returned to the Pacific Ocean. She assisted in the destruction of the Japanese cruiser Jinsu and being seriously damaged by torpedoes during the Battle of Kolombangara. The extent of the damage to Leander saw her docked for repairs until the end of the war. As the war progressed, the size of the RNZN greatly increased, and by the end of the war there were over 60 ships in commission. These ships participated as part of the British and Commonwealth effort against the Axis in Europe, and against the Japanese in the Pacific. They also played an important role in the defense of New Zealand from German raiders, especially when the threat of invasion from Japan appeared imminent in 1942. Many merchant ships were requisitioned and armed for help in defense. One of these was HMNZS Monoi, which saw action against the Japanese submarine I-20 off Fiji in 1942. In 1941–1942, it was decided in an agreement between the New Zealand and United States governments that the best role for the RNZN in the Pacific was as part of the United States Navy. So operational control of the RNZN was transferred to the Southwest Pacific Area Command, and its ships joined United States 7th Fleet task forces. In 1943, the light cruiser HMS Gambia was transferred to the RNZN as HMNZS Gambia. In November 1944, the British Pacific Fleet, a joint British-Commonwealth military formation, was formed, based in Sydney, Australia. Most RNZN ships were transferred to the BPF, including Gambia and Achilles. They took part in the Battle of Okinawa and operations in the Sakishima Islands, near Japan. In August 1945, HMNZS Gambia was New Zealand's representative at the surrender of Japan. Post-war, during April 1947, a series of non-violent mutinies occurred amongst the sailors and non-commissioned officers of 4 RNZN ships and 2 shore bases. Overall, up to 20% of the sailors in the RNZN were involved in the mutinies. The resulting manpower shortage forced the RNZN to remove Black Prince, one of the most powerful warships, from service, and set the Navy's development and expansion back by a decade. Despite this impact, the size and scope of the events have been downplayed over time. RNZN ships participated in the Korean War. On the 29th of June, just 4 days after 135,000 North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel in Korea, the New Zealand government ordered 2 Lock-class frigates, Totira and Pukaki, to prepare to make for Korean waters, and for the whole of the war. At least 2 NZ vessels would be on station in the theatre. On the 3rd of July, these 2 first ships left Devonport Naval Base, Auckland, and joined other Commonwealth forces at Sasebo, Japan, on the 2nd of August. These vessels served under the command of a British flag officer and formed part of the U.S. Navy screening force during the Battle of Incheon. performing shore raids and inland bombardment. Further RNZN Lock-class frigates joined these later, Ratoiti, Hawa, Taupo and Carneri, as well as a number of smaller craft. Only one RNZN sailor was killed during the conflict. During the Incheon bombardments, the Navy later participated in the Malayan Emergency and the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation. The confrontation was the RNZN's last large-scale operation with the Royal Navy. In a security crisis and threat to Malaysia and Sarawak and Brunei, two-thirds of the Royal Navy's operational warships were deployed from 1963 to the end of 1966, with HMNZS Royalist, HMNZS Taranaki, and HMNZS Otago heavily involved in boarding ships, shore patrols, presence, maintaining the use of seaways and support of the RN's amphibious carriers. In the past 3 decades, the RNZN has operated in the Middle East a number of times. RNZN ships played a role in the Iran-Iraq War, aiding the Royal Navy in protecting neutral shipping in the Indian Ocean. Frigates were also sent to participate in the First Gulf War, and more recently Operation Enduring Freedom. The RNZN has played an important part in conflicts in the Pacific as well. Naval forces were utilized in the Bougainville, Solomon Islands and East Timor conflicts of the 1990s. The RNZN often participates in United Nations peacekeeping operations. The Navy's operational authority was the Commodore, Auckland, for the 1st of January 1961, which changed to the Maritime Commander in March 1993. Among the Commodores, Auckland was Commodore J.O.C. Ross, who later wrote The White Ensign in New Zealand, and later Rear Admiral and Chief of Naval Staff John Mackenzie. The RNZN has played a much broader role than just conflict-related activities. Since 1946, it has policed New Zealand's territorial waters and exclusive economic zone for fisheries protection. It also aids New Zealand's deployment in Antarctica at Scott Base. One of the best-known roles that the RNZN played on the world stage was when the frigates Canterbury and the Otago were sent by the Labour government of Norman Kirk to Mururoa Atoll in 1973 to protest against French nuclear testing there. The frigates were sent into the potential blast zone of the weapons, where both ships witnessed one airburst test each, which forced France to then change to underground testing. In May 1982, Prime Minister Rob Muldoon seconded the frigate HMNZS Canterbury to the Royal Navy for the duration of the Falklands War. The Canterbury was deployed to the Armilla Patrol in the Persian Gulf to relieve a British frigate for duty in the South Atlantic. Canterbury was herself relieved by HMNZS Waikato in August. Until the 1960s, the RNZN had, in common with other Dominion navies, flown the White Ensign as a common ensign. Post-war, the foreign policies of these independent states had become more distinctive, and there was a wish and a need for separate identities, particularly if one Dominion was engaged in hostilities where another was not. Thus, in 1968, the RNZN adopted its own ensign, which retains the Union flag in a top quarter but replaces the St. George's Cross with the Southern Cross constellation that is displayed on the national flag. The hydrographic survey ship of the RNZN until 2012 was HMNZS Resolution, succeeding the long-serving HMNZS Mono Y. Resolution was used to survey and chart the sea around New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. A small motorboat, SMB Adventure, was operated from Resolution. Resolution carried some of the most advanced survey technology available. HMNZS Resolution was decommissioned at Devonport Naval Base on the 27th of April 2012. Modern Navy. Current fleet. The RNZN is currently in a transitional period where its role is being broadened into a navy that is more versatile than in the more recent past. Formerly combat-oriented and based on the frigate, a number of new ships have been incorporated into the fleet that have given the RNZN a much broader potential platform from which to work. The categorizations of the ships used here are taken from the RNZN website. Naval Combat Force. The Naval Combat Force currently consists of two Anzac-class frigates, HMNZS Tekaha and HMNZS Taimana. Both ships are based at the Devonport Naval Base on Auckland's North Shore. Tekaha was commissioned on the 26th of July 1997 and Taimana on the 10th of December 1999. The specifications and armaments of the two ships are identical. Naval Patrol Force. The Naval Patrol Force is responsible for policing New Zealand's exclusive economic zone, one of the largest in the world. In addition, the NPF provides assistance to a range of civilian government agencies, including the Department of Conservation, New Zealand Customs and Police, Ministry of Fisheries and others. The NPF currently consists of 2 Protector-class offshore patrol vessels, 4 Protector-class inshore patrol boats. Naval Logistics Support Force. HMNZS Endeavour is the fleet tanker. She provides fuel and other supplies for the frigates when they are on international operations, and for Allied ships should this be required. Endeavour takes her name from the Royal Navy ship that carried James Cook to New Zealand on his first voyage, in 1769. Her home port is the city of New Plymouth. HMNZS Canterbury. The RNZN's new multi-role vessel entered service in June 2007. Naval Diving Support. The Littoral Warfare Support Group consists of the Mine Countermeasures Team, Maritime Survey Team and the Operational Diving Team. The group is supported by the Hydrographic Force and Diving Support Vessel. In addition, the group operate 4 Remus 100 autonomous underwater vehicles. Dive support capability is provided by HMNZS Manawanui. Manawanui is a highly specialized dive support vessel. The operational dive team is responsible for clearance diving, combat diving, explosive ordnance disposal, and underwater repairs and comprises 24 divers capable of operating 2 independent detachments. To become a fully qualified diver involves completion of the 4-week Defense Diver course and the 15-week Able Diver Warfare course. The ODT uses the Viper rebreather for both clearance diving and combat diving. Aircraft. The RNZN operates 8 Command SH-2G Super Seastrike helicopters for use on the 2 frigates, the new multi-role vessel and 2 offshore patrol craft. These 8 aircraft are part of No. 6th Squadron of the RNZAF. The squadron is based at Whanuapai in Auckland, and helicopters are assigned to the ships as they are sent on deployments across the globe. The roles of the helicopters include surface warfare missions and surveillance operations, underwater warfare, helicopter delivery services, logistics, search and rescue, medical evacuation, training, assistance to other government agencies. Future Fleet. The New Zealand Government Defence White Paper released in November 2010 called for an upgrade of the Anzac-class frigates and the replacement of HMNZS Endeavour with a more capable ship. HMNZS Resolution and Manawanui are to be replaced with a single ship. During these upgrades, the Navy suffered from a shortage of skilled staff and lacked the crew to operate an offshore patrol vessel. This is expected to improve as the NZDF's resources are directed to the South Pacific following the end of its commitments to Afghanistan, East Timor and the Solomon Islands. A modest joint force amphibious capability is planned to be operational in 2015. Role. defense in its statement of intent. The NZDF states its primary mission as to secure New Zealand from external threat, to protect our sovereign interests, including in the exclusive economic zone, and to be able to take action to meet likely contingencies in our strategic area of interest. The intermediate outcomes of the NZDF are listed as secure New Zealand, including its people, land, territorial waters, exclusive economic zone, natural resources and critical infrastructure, reduced risks to New Zealand from regional and global insecurity. New Zealand values and interests advanced through participation in regional and international security systems. New Zealand is able to meet future national security challenges. The role of the Navy is to fulfill the maritime elements of the missions of the NZDF. International participation. The RNZN has a role to help prevent any unrest occurring in New Zealand. This can be done by having a presence in overseas waters and assisting redevelopment in troubled countries. For example, any unrest in the Pacific Islands has the potential to affect New Zealand because of the large Pacific Island population. The stability of the South Pacific is considered in the interest of New Zealand. The Navy has participated in peacekeeping and peacemaking in East Timor, Bougainville and the Solomon Islands, supporting land-based operations. Civilian roles. The 2002 Maritime Forces Review identified a number of roles that other government agencies required the RNZN to undertake. Approximately 1,400 days at sea are required to fulfill these roles annually. Roles include patrolling the exclusive economic zone, transport to offshore islands, and support for the New Zealand Customs Service. The RNZN formerly produced hydrographic information for Land Information New Zealand under a commercial contract arrangement. However, with the decommissioning of the dedicated hydrographic survey ship HMNZS Resolution, this has lapsed and the Navy now focuses on military hydrography. Current deployments. Since 2001, both ANZAC frigates have participated in the United States' Operation Enduring Freedom in the Persian Gulf and have conducted maritime patrol operations in support of American and Allied efforts in Afghanistan. On the 21st of June 2006, Amana was in Southeast Asia, and Takaha was in New Zealand waters, to be deployed to Southeast Asia in the second half of 2006. Personnel. On the 30th of June 2014, the RNZN consisted of 2,050 regular force personnel, 392 Naval Reserve personnel, Reserves Fleet Reserve. All regular force personnel on discharge from the RNZN are liable for service in the Royal New Zealand Navy Fleet Reserve. The Fleet Reserve has an active and inactive list. RNZN-VR personnel can choose to serve 4 years in the Fleet Reserve on discharge. The RNZN has not published Fleet Reserve numbers since the early 1990s. The Volunteer Reserve. The primary reserve component of the RNZN is the Royal New Zealand Naval Volunteer Reserve, which is organised into 4 units based in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Dunedin. HMNZS Napona Naval Reserve, Auckland. HMNZS Alfred Naval Reserve, Wellington. HMNZS Pegasus Naval Reserve, Christchurch. HMNZS Toroit Naval Reserve, Dunedin. At present, civilians can join the RNZN-VR in one of 3 branches: administration, sea service, and maritime trade organization. In addition, ex-regular force personnel can now join the RNZN-VR in the former branch, and depending on time out of the service rank. The requirement to attend compulsory training 1 night a week has recently been removed. Training naval ratings begin begin a 18-week basic training course prior to commencing the branch training, which focuses on the chosen trade. Naval officers complete 22 weeks of training in 3 phases before commencing specialist training. Finance routine funding. The RNZN is funded through a vote of the Parliament of New Zealand. The New Zealand Defence Force funds personnel, operating and finance costs. Funding is then allocated to specific output classes, which are aligned to policy objectives. Funding allocation in each output class includes consumables, personnel, depreciation and a capital charge. The capital charge is a budgetary mechanism to reflect the cost of Crown capital and was set at 7.5% for the 2009-2010 year. Large projects. The Ministry of Defence is responsible for the acquisition of significant items of military equipment needed to meet New Zealand Defence Force capability requirements. Funding for the Ministry of Defence is appropriated separately. Onshore establishments. The Navy Museum. The Navy Museum of the Royal New Zealand Navy is located at 64 King Edward Parade, Devonport, Auckland, New Zealand, and contains important collections of naval artifacts and extensive records. Naval Communications Facility Irirangi. HMNZS Irirangi was a naval communication station at Waiauru from 1943 to 1993. Uniforms and insignia. Uniforms of the RNZN are very similar to those of the British Royal Navy and other Commonwealth of Nations navies. However, RNZN personnel wear the nationality marker New Zealand on a curved shoulder flash on the service uniform and embroidered on shoulder slip-ons. Also, the RNZN uses the rank of ensign as its lowest commissioned rank.